Chuk joining?
Most likely, yeah. I saw he did some kind of interaction on LinkedIn. All right. I'm gonna go live, but I'm gonna turn my video off. You can talk us in, and then I have to run to the bathroom really bad. I'll be back.
Is it live?
It will be. You ready?
I'm ready.
You're good.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome to this week's Office Hours. I'm Brian Schuster. I am the co-founder of Lucid, where we help B2B teams really clarify their messaging and help grow leads inside of their business, as well as getting investment. We've been very lucky recently that a lot of our companies have just started closing funding rounds. I can't announce those yet, but it ended up being quite exciting. So I'm very happy to talk about that. Today we should have two people on with us. Garrett will be with us shortly in a moment. And we have a gentleman named Chuk, who's Garrett is quite familiar with, and we're going to be talking a little bit about networking. So to talk us in here, master the power of connection in B2B sales. That seems to be such a common thing for web or for most B2B businesses, that even as the company gets really, really big, and I mean like bigger than you would expect, right? Or it gets to 5 million, 10 million, networking seems to be a really important part of that process, that you really can't get away from that. And even I was talking to a business recently that was talking about selling like $100 million contracts, right? Massive contracts, right? Where it could be really big. And the way that most of their decision makers, the people who would be paying these giant checks, make decisions is by going to a networking event or a conference, a meetup, whatever, learning about the product, and then having an analyst do something, right? Even there's still networking that's seriously involved with it. So talking us into this, the world of B2B sales, not just about closing deals, it's about building meaningful connections that lead to long-term success. Understanding the power of connection is key to driving results through the B2B sales funnel. This week's office hours are focused on how to create strong relationships at every touch point, whether with potential customers, partners, or stakeholders, and that can give you a distinct edge. We'll explore how honing your skills impact your sales funnel and the initial outreach to the final conversation, and why it's one of the most valuable assets in your toolkit. Speaking of which, Garrett, that's basically how we built our business up until this point, is almost exclusively networking.
Yeah. Chuk said he was on the link, but couldn't hear. Chuk's coming. Okay. Keep talking, Brian. I'm gonna manually type this link for him.
So right. So it's really interesting how important that is, and how, like, as you scale up your organization, and B2B folks tend to do this. Like, let me put it this way. Like, if you're running a B2C, it's really common to start with networking, right? To do this, or that most of the people who buy your service from the get-go are going to be folks that know you, right? We've all been there, right? You launch a service and you email 20 people in your network, right? Or you contact the folks you already know, you ask your friend to use it. That's common. But you kind of have in your head, oh, I can't do this, right? I can't sell. I'm selling this thing for $10 a month. I can't do this. So you very quickly automate your way to, let's go and start running ads. Let's go and start running LinkedIn. Let's go and do outreach. Let's build a landing page, right? You do that. And this founder kind of steps back, and it's not really a big part of their deal. Versus in B2B, like you go a really long way and still rely really heavily on networking to do what you need to. And you can avoid that problem of getting the founder out of the business for some time. But eventually you got to be able to split yourself out to be able to do that, right? And it's not just networking then. But here's the thing. Doesn't mean networking goes away. It just means who's doing the networking needs to change. That it goes from a founder to another individual inside of the organization, or individuals inside the organization and what they do, right? Where you move to an event strategy or something, something else. Chuk, welcome.
Sorry, gents. I'm so sorry about those technical.
No worries. It's always technical
Always
stuff.
happen.
Yeah. How you doing?
Happy to be here, y'all. It's a beautiful Friday morning. I'm kicking off my vacation today too from work, so glad to be joining you on that first.
Wonderful. I just introduced myself and Garrett. Why don't you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah. So how are we doing, y'all? My name is Chukwudi Kanu. I go by Chuk for short. I'm the program manager at Plug and Play Tech Center that just came to Cedar Park, Texas.
Dude, is there a way to turn your mic up?
Yep, there is. How's this?
That's way better. That's awesome. Okay.
So I'll kick it off again. Just call me Chuk, y'all. Program manager at Plug and Play Tech Center. I'm essentially their head of network in the Austin area. And what Plug and Play is a global corporate innovation platform that works with over 55% of the Fortune 1000. We are the connective tissue for corporations, startups, universities, government agencies, and investors. And so here in Austin, our goal is to really engage all the corporates in Texas with all the startups and other stakeholders in the region. And I'm just the guy facilitating that connective tissue. Happy to be here with Garrett, longtime friend, Brian. Like it's just a pleasure, y'all. And they both have cooler backgrounds than me, as you can tell. So,
Well, thank you. So, all right. So we're talking about networking and connection, and particularly especially when it sits with B2B businesses. I mean, kind of the run up to this was saying that like B2C founders know, like, if they're making sales, like just starting off, right? It's like you may ask friends, family, people you know to do this. You may get an email list of some people you know and send it off to them. Very quickly, though, you know, this isn't scalable. This isn't how it's supposed to be. So you very quickly offload into other things. Versus with B2B, you kind of never get away from networking. Like that is like almost at the core. Like I'm dealing with companies right now in our group. They're like, within like a few years, we're expecting them to be like billion-dollar enterprises, right? To do, and yet for every single one of them, it's like, yep, you're going to be networking and talking to folks, and that's going to be a key way for you to do that. It might change where it's like it's probably best that the founder is not the one doing this, that you can train other folks to do that. So actually, let's get started. So you mentioned you're the connective tissue for this, you know, networking. What exactly does that mean, or how would you describe that as far as as your offering and what you do and what that means?
yeah. So at Plug and Play, we also sell to corporates. So all those like Fortune 500 folks I mentioned are all also our clients. And so we need to also come up with unique ways to engage them. And so for me in Austin, it's how do I, create events that have the ROI of getting us the decision maker for a Silicon Labs, or for an HEB, like all these big Texas brands. And because, in B2B, like especially with these big companies, half your battle is mapping out the org chart and figuring out who's going to be your internal champion to help get this deal across the finish line in the next 6 to 12 months, or maybe it's 18, depending on who you're selling to. It always depends. And so my role is creating these really awesome events, whether it's dinners, our big expos, supporting our summits in HQ, or one-off like events that can really be exclusive VIP experiences for these types of decision makers that make them go, hey, I love what we're doing, would love to be in the ecosystem. How can I support? And then that's how we get them. So I'm essentially building this channel for us to get the customers, to your point on the B2B side, that you need. And that's really what B2B founders have to do. They have to figure out, what will my flywheel be? What will be the touch points that I know I can use anytime I'm dealing with a specific type of client to get them closer to closing. And so that's my role, is, creating those touch points essentially.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into a rabbit hole here, but I'm really fascinated about this. What makes a great dinner where the dinner is there to help sell? Like all of us know how to have a wonderful dinner, right? Like one of our favorite groups in Austin is a Reveal, right? To do that. But that's specifically there to be like no selling, just people meeting people, right? So there's like, oh, we're not selling, and it ends up being phenomenal, right? What do you do for a dinner where it's like, my goal for the dinner is we're going to invite people here and I'm judging the ROI of that dinner based on how many new connections I get, how much sales I get done, or how much closer a deal gets to the door, or do I get a new opportunity? So how do you think about and construct that sort of experience?
I think the best dinners, and this is like my take on it, because I'm also learning a lot through this role too. from what I've observed, the best dinners are the ones that really connect to you as a human. And this is why, like, the idea of the professional personal network, I don't really believe in that, because all like business is personal. And we only do professional stuff when we're like doing the harsher side of business, when it comes to layoffs, et cetera, like all those numbers. I think a good dinner is something that I could go home, be in bed with my girlfriend and see, look what I did today. This is such a great experience, or talk to my boss. And also that, from that side also is like, hey boss, like I met these cool folks, look, this makes me look good. This helps our business. I met all these really amazing people because of this thing. Yeah. And they have a service where we maybe can do this more. Maybe we should pay 150K for access to what they're doing. That's really what those dinners are. They really focus on the guest as a human. They curate a great group of people who can help each other, that are really interesting, and provide a unique experience that, because again, we're human, end of the day, we're like, let's have fun. Let's have a good time. Let's meet some interesting people. And the dinners allow you to be yourself, allow you to be interesting, allow you to show off who you are and what you do amongst other people like you, and also connect to them on a deeper level within that hour and a half to 2 hour period. And then, oh, go ahead.
If you don't mind, can you speak to like some of the specifics on the details on how you make a great dinner, or like what are the, like, almost think of the operational things you do to do this, right?
Operational, yeah, no. It's funny because I'm planning a dinner like this at the end of the month. So first and foremost, the venue. Like for example, the Flower House off of Second Street. I forget the actual, La Condesa is the actual name of the restaurant, but within it is the Flower House. I've hosted a really good dinner there. For example, it's like really like more like in a basement-ish area tucked away from the main area. So thinking about like the venue, the venue, the experience, like where do you want to host this? What would be a great place to bring people? The Flower House I use because like in that place, I remember vividly because I hit my head going downstairs twice. And so that's the first thing that you do. So now I'm not going to forget that because I hit my head. But two, get into this area that has a cocktail area for just like, everyone talking, hanging out and standing, and then the actual dining room area. And so this is a place away from the chaos of the restaurant, away from the music, the noise, that's just for us. And that like context switch is already like okay, this is already a unique thing. This is kind of cool to your attendees. So what are those hooks that you can do from a great venue that provide a unique experience that they're already not going to forget? So that's number one. Number two, once you have that venue, think about the people. Like these, ideally, like, when you think of a dinner, like, oh, I'm going to this dinner, you want to be able to name drop folks. You want to be able to name drop logos. You want, like, this is something that, like, you're taking time out of your day to hang out with other people that you don't know. You want to be able to be like, wow, this is a great use of my time, especially when you're at the decision-making level where, like, you have a ton of other things to do on top of your personal life. Why are you being pulled away from saying goodnight to your kids for something that's, mediocre, haphazard, or like, it's just a basic generic, they're just trying. Once you have that, really cool, great group of people, there's a lot of things you could do here in terms of like placing people next to each other, who's who. But all in all, you want a way to break the ice for these folks. Like, what are some good icebreakers that would allow you to enable and empower everyone to share a bit of their story, what they're working on, and get feedback on that from the group in different parts. So, making it easy for them to all like mesh together and have some great conversations. Because I've been to a few dinners where they just bring the folks together and they're like, all right, have at it. And then it just kind of, someone typically takes the lead, but, people just kind of like mesh. And there are missed opportunities where it's like, oh, actually, that person did this. I didn't even know because we didn't get to talk. So using like really nice icebreakers to get people sucked into just being together in the atmosphere and having a good time is another aspect. Then of course the food is kind of secondary, but the food still does need to be good. But honestly, good, there's that saying like, good vibes elevate whatever food you're eating. Because I vividly remember having some great times eating Red Lobster growing up, but I went back as an adult and it was ass. Like it was like I was like, I used to eat this, man. Like I have very fond memories at Red Lobster.
Yeah.
But And then lastly, the follow-up, to like being very thoughtful about, how you say thank you. Some people do handwritten envelopes, something, and you can do this also on the invitation side. Something I have wanted to try, but have not had the excuse to, is to ride around Austin on horseback in the fall when it's not too hot and just like hand deliver invitations to security at certain things. And then they're like, hey, a dude on horseback brought this for you. Like what the fuck? Like that would be like something like what they got me an invitation with like a nice like wax stamp and delivered it on a horseback. Like it's because it's the experience, man. The thoughtful gestures that people remember long past the dinner that really, show that you actually care about me. You're really interested in my business, clearly. If you're doing all this. And I had a great time. So I'll hear you out at the minimum. Those are my thoughts in a long, somewhat procedural standpoint. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, describe the worst dinner that you've ever been to and the circumstances that made it the worst dinner.
Worst dinner I've ever been to was a family dinner, so I'm not going to talk about that. But from a business standpoint,
That would probably be more appropriate for the discussion.
Thanksgiving 04. It was a terrible dinner. No.
It wasn't even Thanksgiving. No, but anyway, there's a lot of different like folks that do a dinner at scale type of thing to boost their network without going deep. Like there's a few different examples of that in Austin, in New York, where I'm originally from, etc. I've been to a few of those. This one, I won't state location, but no, actually, I don't really care. It was in Austin. So anyway, long story short, I don't even remember the name. They didn't make it clear and it's the little things, I believe little things matter. So in this experience, for one, they gave the address. It was in this random place I'd never been before. And it was tucked away, the entrance. They never explained the parking situation. So that's number one. So I remember I was late because I was circling for a good 15 minutes. Because the location it's right by Rainy. But like I was circling for a while trying to find like where I was gonna just park this Kia. And then I finally did. I, jimmied it, into a spot, finagled it. It was kind of a little out of the lane in terms of here's the sign, that's the cutoff, but we made it work. We paid what we had to do. And then we get in. So I'm already 20 minutes late, thereabouts, because then I had to walk 3 blocks down to actually get inside the place. I get there, they already told us where our area was, so I just walked to our area. These are all people I've never met before. I just did this similar to like any other networking event, just to meet people, say hello. So I get to the table, name is spelled wrong. Cool, that's life. They had
your name's spelled wrong.
Yeah, because they had our names laid out on the table. My name was spelled wrong. That's my life, but it's like, damn, all right, cool. Great, y'all. And I took it off because my name's wrong, so I'm not gonna show that. And then other folks arrived. I actually knew somebody at the dinner, which was really cool. And I literally had a meeting with them earlier that day, which was hilarious. But there wasn't really any proper facilitation. I had a terrible experience like getting into the place. And then I essentially, and my counterpart who I knew, we had both, and he has hosted way more dinners than I have. He essentially became the glue that like made things flow. But someone didn't show up, and we didn't, of course, didn't know that, but that's the thing with these services. And so we kind of just like flowed, but it was clear that folks were tired. It was clear that, we just were to our own devices. So we had fun for what it was. But overall, I didn't feel like I left knowing a lot about the other folks. I actually spoke more to the guy I already knew, even though we weren't even next to each other. And then at one point we went to the bar and that was it. And then we're like, yeah, we're just gonna leave. And we left early. So I don't even remember the other 2 people because there were 4 of us. I don't remember the other 2 folks that I met there. But all in all, like yeah.
Interesting.
So compare that against the best dinner that you've ever been to.
Best dinner I've ever been to. The guest list was crazy. Guest list was crazy. Literally like heads of Texas logos that all of us here would recognize. There was a clear agenda in terms of people arriving, where they should go, directing them once they get to the venue, conversation with the staff. Parking situation was made very clear. There was literally signage of like, this is where you need to go.
Interesting.
Yeah, signage too of like, signage to like the private room area for the restaurant. We get upstairs. I'm already awestruck because the mayor of one of the cities in Texas is here. I'm like, oh shit, this is kind of cool. We start with a little cocktail hour where people are just like getting little drinks and talking and mingling, and they use that to be the buffer for people who show up late. Because people always show up late, regardless. Like that's just the nature of life. But it's a buffer for if you did, it's very easy for you to get into conversation to flow. And then once they had a good enough understanding of maybe someone's not able to make it, I think we've got most of the group here, and we're still on track. They ushered us into the dining area where we all sat down. We had all talked a little bit, got to know our different, drink partners. Weren't paired. It was just like, you gravitate to people when you enter a space and maybe you have a conversation for the whole time or not. But we did that dance, and then they said, introduce yourself. And this is kind of like an ecosystem dinner. Introduce yourself, state your name, title, your favorite thing about Texas, and then what you think could be better about the innovation ecosystem in Austin. And that was like a very like, this is why we're here, priming people to, share what they do. Because in this conversation, your title and role is essentially your vantage point in the ecosystem. And then what you think we can do better, it like sets the tone for the conversation. We'd already warmed up via just the drinks, and it's like, okay, sure, here's who I am. And it was a very interesting way to dive into just a friendly ecosystem get together. Plus, you talked about what you love about Texas before you gave the other aspects of what you think could be better in Austin. So, I had a great time.
So it seems like one of the biggest things overall is just having clear structure, telling people this is what you should expect. This is what's going to happen. Go here, do this, park here. Having all that stuff is a major difference.
Yeah, everything should be intentional. Even when things are left to be kind of loose and just seem like they're just haphazard, I think everything should be intentional. When it comes to, and this is not just dinners, but whenever you're in the act of bringing people together, like again, these are people's lives. This is their time. Like I think about the human experience. When you think about the human experience and like what you're giving that individual, I think as long as you are very intentional with their time, with giving them a unique experience, even if they don't do business, as long as this is something that they can go to bed, talk to their partner and be like, oh my God, I had a great time. I wouldn't do business with this person. I don't think I want to. I don't think it makes sense right now. But I'm not going to forget that this was an awesome experience that they gave me. Even if that's not today, that's something they carry with them throughout life.
Right.
I think that's the not just for dinners again, but for any unique gathering, even like this. Like I appreciate y'all's time. It is my first off, like already, like for example, this is my first office hours on LinkedIn. This is my first ever LinkedIn Live, period. And so like I'm not gonna forget that. Number one. So yeah.
So I'm curious for these sorts of events. If I'm understanding correctly, you guys put these events on behalf of other clients. Is that correct? Where somebody says they want to do, or this is for yourself?
This is because being that connective tissue, like we have to host events that bring folks together. And so our model is we sell to corporates, but we do run accelerator programs for what we call scale up companies. So people who are enterprise ready, et cetera, like B2B folks. Like for example, we are about to wrap up our second accelerator cohort for advanced manufacturing here in the Cedar Park, Austin area. And we accelerated 10 companies. These accelerators are different from like the Techstars or a YC because we take no equity, they pay no fees, because these are companies that like, no, like they are big. They are like move like 10 million, trying to get to 150, some already unicorns, and they leverage us to tap into our network in different regions. And we essentially curate an environment of like decision makers or stakeholders within the corporates they're trying to meet, and empower them to meet those folks one-to-one in person and go from there, whether that's through actual scheduled in-person meetings at our office to hosting big expos like the one on October 9th, where we have 300 folks that'll include major big Texas corporates, investors, learning from differently. I think our keynote is Gabe Domenicello from Umbra Space, for example. He's the president. And so that's that. Like we do everything from that to these intimate dinners, to open coffees, to eventually lunch and learns, which we're going to kick off next month. So yeah.
Interesting. So how do you guys judge the effectiveness of dinners? Like, let me put it this way, like, you're about to run a dinner later this month. And again, you'll have, again, knowing marketing, you have to run these over a period of time, right? But like, let's say I'm looking at your business and I'm trying to decide here, like, or let's say I'm listening on this call, right? And I decide, nope, dinner sound great. That sounds fantastic. How do I judge the effectiveness of that? Like, how does somebody who's discerning look and go and say, okay, these were absolutely worth it because I got ... out of it, right? Again, having a great time, that's really good, right? But I had this with a client the other day where it's like, hey, even if I really liked it, I'm still going to look at the ROI because it's important to me, right? So how do you judge that for a dinner? How do you judge that?
In the simplest terms, what deal, because it depends on what you're hosting the dinner for, but generally speaking, what quote unquote deal tickets were in the room, and were you able to push the needle on any of those through the dinner? And so from prior experiences, I've hosted dinners that were supposed to either engage new potential leads with folks that are already in the pipeline or that are sold. And I've also done that like separately for all three of those like tiers, where it's like, okay, let's host a dinner to really re-engage somebody that's gone a little cold and try to get them further. Let's host a dinner with a new customer segment to get some intel in terms of like how to really approach selling to them. And also, let's do this dinner to actually close these people after they've engaged with our ecosystem. And so it really comes down to like, how big are the deals that you were able to get in that room? Did they have a great experience? Did you get any intel in terms of, because during that dinner, you should position it in a way that you're able to ask these questions to the different folks in the room, both because you're the curator of that, and because like that's where like dinners are places where this type of intel just comes out, where it's like, what, actually do like my fiscal year ends next month. And we can only do 10K to start off with you right now. If you wait 3 months, I think we can figure out a way to do like 200K with these expectations. And let's hop on a call next week with now me looping my boss, who I know we've been working to get scheduled some time on to make that happen. So yeah. And I think what's important to note about all these, whether it's a dinner, it's an event, these are all loops that you use to get people in your orbit. Like think of yourself as like the sun in a solar system for some reason the rings of Saturn, whatever. Those are the rings of orbit that you typically have in terms of gravity. You want to have touch points that enable you, and that could be a dinner, that could be a newsletter. That could be for founders, that's your investor updates. These are the loops that you use to bring people back into your orbit when they're drifting away, or just to like making sure that they're maintained fixed point within your orbit or come closer. That's what all of it is. That's the way I look at relationship building.
Okay. Let's say you didn't have, okay, so this is an interesting question. Let's say you didn't have networking or dinners or things like that to build this, but you fundamentally had to still build the same business, right? The same thing there, and it was your responsibility. What would you do instead? Like, let's say a person to person wasn't the thing. What is this? What's the best alternative to events? in networking?
Alternative to events, man. It's a really good question. Highlighting other people potentially, like this, like what you're doing right now. This really, yeah, because I think it all really does come down to people. But if you don't want to do one to many, then do like one to one, where you're talking to those decision makers and highlighting them in a format like this, where they get to showcase their expertise, they get to say they look good to their boss, or just look good in general because they're able to convey something that they haven't been able to convey until you. And then by you sharing that, you by proxy become somebody that, one, looks good from a thought leadership standpoint, but two, you're deepening a relationship with that person where it's like, hey, because of you, I was able to like do X, Y, and Z. Let me know I can support. And also you get that person in a room with you, because like what's for, like, for example, we're recording, but it's live on LinkedIn. What's recorded is not what's always captured in a podcast interview, as Garrett, you know, from our previous podcast conversation. Like sometimes like you can bring someone on for a podcast and then you record for like an hour and they're like, you know what, man, I really am enjoying the conversation. Let's keep riffing. Like I've had a podcast interview where I ended up speaking to somebody for a good like 6 hours. You know, like no bullshit, like 6 hours. Yeah, I also have podcasts on the side to everyone here. Network podcast, type in the networkpodcast.com, interviewing great relationship builders about relationship building. But long story short, that interview was like, and it was one of those that we had such like interesting synergies that we kept riffing even afterwards. And like, yeah, we just gotta meet in person, for sure. So yeah, like that. I think that's another example of what you could do. Or, and even if you're not like that, then something not to the same degree, but like Humans New York-esque. I think our, actually, not even that, our future, I think they got acquired by Morning Brew. That's another example of they didn't have connections to all the people they were highlighting, but they kept highlighting amazing like influencers in tech who built amazing companies, all these luminaries in a unique like TikTok real, Instagram real S strategy that like was extremely engaging via video, and they were able to scale that and get acquired by the morning. And so like there's different ways to go about it. Think of it as one to one, one to many, but the idea is like utilizing those things to, if not highlight those people, then get into the same room with them. I think that's what it comes down to. Then of course you can just go to events where those people are, but I think the idea should be to get people within your orbit, not always to just go in their orbit. Because like sometimes these like events are a shot in the dark, you know. Yeah. I hope that answered the question. Let me know if I'm missing anything.
No, it's interesting because again, like when we think about B2B strategies, right? To think about this, you think you have many options you can go through and do. I mean, there's a core thing. First off, I just noticed you have a massive water jug there. That is, is that one of those challenges to say, I'm going to finish this damn thing before the end of the day to stay hydrated?
Buy this when I was doing 75 hard last year.
There, okay, there it is.
Like outside from a functional standpoint, because I carry a briefcase, so it like balances me out as I have my briefcase in one hand and this in the other when I go to work. But there's something really great about knowing where your water will be at all times and not having to seek it out. And like it does that because the goal is to finish it in one day, and it's not even a goal anymore, it just happens
Right.
at this point. But it's near me. This is all the water I need for the day. The only like time I need to worry about figuring out how much water I need is when I'm refilling it each day. And I already have a easy process of doing that.
I
So, yeah.
understand. Cool. We don't have to harp on it. I just saw it and thought, yeah, 75 hard makes sense. But no, what I was getting at before is that as a founder, you have many strategies you can potentially implement in many different ways. There tends to be a core strategy that just works, right? I mean, especially as we're talking to our founders, which tend to be high ticket, B2B, technical, founder-driven sales, right? Even at the amount, right? Like our founders are still going to be in part of sales, you know, probably 3 years from now, just because they're so high ticket that that's what's, they just need to be a part of it, right? And they can afford that. But you think about it for lead generation, we think it's that, okay, well, what should they be investing in and doing? And often you can kind of see where it's like, okay, well, you could be investing in events, right, to do this sort of thing and doing this. But if I wasn't doing that, what would be the alternative, right? For me, I find it helps place where is this equally useful, right? Where is this alternative to this, right? And you kind of mentioned, well, if you're not doing networking or one-to-many networking like events, you're doing one-to-one, right? Which is another alternative, or you're doing podcasts, which is kind of an alternative to a one-to-many, right? Because we'll take this piece of content, cut it up into a bunch of other pieces of content, throw it on our platforms for the next, in the next coming, weeks, right, to go through. And that's additional distribution for everyone here, right, to get that in. So it helps to understand how you think about it and where it fits in. But okay, so we talked about the dinners to some degrees. What are the other sort of events that you're running, and how do they significantly differ from dinners, right? Because as we're talking about this, is that if dinners is one type of thing you're doing, you also mentioned you're doing office hours, right? Your own version of office or lunch and learns, right? To do this versus something else. What's the meaningful difference between those in your eyes?
The quality of attendees, and when I mean quality, I mean that from a sales standpoint, in terms of it's easier to convince folks to come to, say, a dinner that are super, because people like to come to dinners, especially when it's super exclusive and the guest list is fire. And so that's easier than, say, a lunch and learn, which is we just highlight one key individual and their expertise over lunch at our office, versus that, and that's open to the community. It's not exclusive. It's open to the public, and so you can get anybody at that. And even then, the speakers won't always be, let's say the head of innovation at a PepsiCo, for example. They'll probably be a little less senior, still impactful, but it's hard to get those guests for that type of event because they want to know who's in the room and who they're speaking to. Those types of speakers we do have at our expos. Those are our, because we'll maybe have 50 folks at our lunch and learns. Our expos are 300 to 500. And like the quality of speakers, I mean, and I say expo and innovation days. Those are two different things. Our expos are essentially the graduation demo days for our accelerator cohorts, where they get the opportunity to share what they've been working on, and case studies of the product, because they really want to use it to reach certain folks. And they essentially use our expos to get whatever, if they're after the Austin region, any leads that they've been working in Texas, they'll invite to our expo to see them pitch on stage and meet. And so that's where we have, for example, the former chairman of Tokyo Electron US, just before he retired, was at one of our expos. Or the vice president of spacecraft, Janice Bruce, she pitched the last one too. Thomas Healy, the youngest CEO of a publicly traded company, he was a keynote speaker, and then the rest of our cohort spoke as well. And so 300 people, very high quality decision makers in the room. Our innovation days are somewhat similar, but they're focused and themed around a specific topic. And our aerospace and defense one that happened 3-4 weeks ago, we had over 500 people at that. It was at the Driscoll. We didn't go as much according to plan as we wanted to, but we had some really awesome confirmed speakers for that too. And that's really the gist of it. Those are the range of events that we're working on. There are a few others that we're trying to do to really highlight folks in the ecosystem. But the way I think about it is a dinner is like think of your quality funnel. Like dinner is where you really zero in on quality. And then it expands out. Like lunch and learns are cool, it expands out. Then our expo is like anyone can come, they're open, but we also have some super high quality speakers on stage, and same for our innovation days. That's our quote unquote event funnel.
Interesting. So for you personally, why this field of work in general, like as opposed to other ones? Like when did you decide, yeah, I'm gonna bring people together and that's my vocation?
It's hilarious because I literally spent the last 2 weeks writing about this. Oh my God. So my leadership style is servant leadership. that enables me to empower others. Like I have a very people first mentality. And the way I realized this was, how old am I? I'm like about to be 28. What day is that? 28 in like a week. So about 7 years ago, I noticed this problem on campus where underrepresented students were about to hit their senior year, didn't have any internships, were just discovering and realizing all the opportunities they missed out on, and as a result, didn't get access to certain high-paying fields, and their path to get there was a lot harder. And so the idea of this event that I call Life at Bang, because my school was Binghamton University, was to get alumni who were already in those high growth paying fields and outgoing students who were working at Google, working in venture, working in tech to share their insights and expertise and essentially spread awareness through just the realness of their journey to these students. And then we also issued a few like Learn to Code scholarships and created a scholarship fund that enabled folks to get some funding to create their own internship. And so that event and initiative was created in 10 days. So I shared that event idea, and this is before finals week of like 2017. And so it was a crazy rush to say the least, because I'd noticed that problem for a while. And then I called one of my mentors just before me and my fraternity brothers on campus, told him the idea. We jammed on it. We said, let's hop on this. And man, he's like, all right, let's get this done. And so went to work recruiting different friends and colleagues around campus that were in leadership positions to secure attendance, secure funding, get different organizations on board, because the best way to get attendees, especially before finals week, is to make everyone promoted as if it's their own event. And ultimately, like we had 120 plus folks there. It was cool. What I really remember, and it was awesome, like so much feedback from them. That initiative became an org. We've like helped people get 3 million in annualized salaries since then. Although it doesn't exist anymore, but it was a really good effort for 4 years. But that specific day, dude, after like, I know I yap a lot, but let me I'll wrap in a second. I vividly remember after everyone had left, because like people were thanking us, they were so happy. Someone cried afterwards because they were like, dude, this is exactly what I needed, because I just didn't know what to do. And so after the event, I just like fell on the floor, man, and I started laughing. Like I literally like fell just standing and I just fell backwards and just like Snow Angel just looked up at the ceiling and just started laughing, man, because I just all the like everything in terms of, because before that I had done like some things, but I just wasn't sure how to approach solving problems and like what the best way for myself to do it was. And I was an engineering student, of course, like I knew how to code, all this stuff, built some things, but that wasn't what resonated to me. And that was like when everything clicked, dude. That right there in that moment after that event was when it's like, this is me. This is like who I am. This is what I need to do. This is something that I can use to really better folks. And I've done it since then in so many different ways. So yeah, man, like I'm a people first servant leader that empowers others through bringing them together in these unique experiences. That's me.
I'll second that. I mean, you're obviously you and I are both very well networked people in Austin, and I would say you're one of the better networked people in Austin. You go to stuff all the time. You're great at networking and making connections with people. You're like very sociable and personable and fun. If you were talking to an early founder, this could also be yourself 10 years ago, what lessons could you give them about the process of networking and building community that you wish you had known then?
If you have some posters, number one, at your desk or like at your door, just write follow up so you have reminders to follow up at every touch point, because that is one of the hardest things to do. It is one of the simplest. It is the thing that has the most ROI, but it is one of the hardest to do because it is a separate task from your day to day that you have to really stop and think after an event, because that's purely manual half the time, but that will like give you the most benefit. And it's not about being able to follow with everyone. Like, who are the people that you really leaned in? Like when you go to an event, you meet people because you're gonna be told to go to events as a founder to meet folks, and you will, because engineered serendipity, that's what events essentially are, in a sense. But make sure to follow up. Always remember to follow up, and don't worry about meeting Bill Gates at an event. Like, typically it's your peers that help you, or the folks that are a little ahead of you than like a Bill Gates. You know, you don't need Elon Musk on your cap table. It's awesome. It'd be cool to say. It will definitely get you more investors. Like, you know, a lot, like, humans are sheep. A lot of investors, there's a reason why there's the concept of lead investors versus other investors, because every investor is not a lead. A lot of them are mostly sheep. And you need those folks who put the first checks in and also lead to wrangle the rest of the sheep. And so with that in mind, really follow up. And I say that to build a relationship. And following up, what does that mean? Because everyone says that, but no one explains what it means. Obviously, send the follow-up. If you actually like the person, and there were some things that were interesting, say that in a follow-up email. And ask, can we go to coffee? Or ask if you can send them a card. You know, maybe that's not appropriate at the first meeting, but at some point, you know, if you, depending on the level of engagement, like when I first met Garrett, it was, yeah, I knew this is a guy I wanted to hang around for sure. Like, he was so fucking, like, look, he's just so cool, dude. Look at him. Like, look at his desk. Is that mahogany? Like, bro, that's so cool.
This is that fiberboard that you get from China when you order things from China.
You know, but that's the first thing. And then secondly, on the networking front, like, figure out what your flywheel for bringing people into your orbit is. Because, like, for example, I'm an introvert that hosts events. Part of why I host events is because I do not have to talk to everybody as the one who hosted the event. Everyone knows I hosted it, which means I can talk to everybody when I need to, when I want to, even if we never spoke at the event, because I hosted it and they saw me and they remember my hat. But I don't have to talk to everybody, and I personally love that because I have an upper ceiling for how many people I can talk to. And once my battery is done, everyone can fuck off, respectfully. But yeah, like, I remember, like, I went to an Austin Tech Startup Week like last year. It was last year, and a friend was like, "You want to do the crawl?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm going to bed." And this is like at 5 p.m. I'm like, "I'm going to bed. Y'all have a great day. I'm done here." And so, but figure out what works for you. You don't have to. You don't have to go to networking. Like, you really, if you don't want to go, you don't have to do that. Maybe you're someone who's good at writing and telling stories. Reach out to some folks. There's so many, like, there's 8 billion people on this planet, and there's so many stories we don't hear about. You know, figure out your strategy that works for you for engaging the individuals you want to meet, and then do that consistently. Like, I think, and one of the better examples of that I like, you know, look up to, for example, is Harry Stebbings. I don't know if either of you are familiar with him, the 20-minute VC podcast. So in 2015, he wanted to figure out a way to break into venture and learn about VC. And he noticed that there's no real, like, content about venture capital, highlighting investors, and all of it was like hour and a half long, not easily digestible. And so he decided to make a version of that in 20 minutes. And then he's done that since 2015. He's, I think, a little over 3,000 episodes in, and like, because of that, he was able to raise his current 20 VC fund that's like over $100 million of funding from like almost all the big names in venture. You know, and that's like over a decade later, almost a decade later from doing that. And so, and he did that consistently in that time, just highlighting people's stories, building the brand. And it's a podcast, yes, but it really was just him sharing stories. A similar thing to that, but not for networking, but still is a cool flywheel. I love what Brandon Stanfield has done for like Humans of New York. Like, that shit is so fucking awesome. Like, could you imagine taking a camera in New York City and asking some random person to share their story, and they cuss you out because, like, what the fuck is wrong? Who the hell are you? Random white dude. You want me to tell you my life story and all my struggles because you have a fucking camera? Somehow he did that. Like, what the fuck? Somehow he's able to get people to pour out their souls and their humanity through that content in Humans of New York. And of course, like, so many other folks that try to replicate that. But all I have to say, because I'm yapping so much, y'all, figure out what it is. It could be highlighting stories. It could be curating these events and being a facilitator. It could be just you're the one that does all these unique experiences, like what Andrew Young is doing in New York City. Whatever it is, just, figure out, maybe it's just hosting a really awesome Slack community that helps people. But all you have to do is just figure out your flywheel for getting the folks you want in your orbit, and doing that early, because relationships like span business. Like it's like, like maybe this decade I do events, but like after this, I just like only do retreats, for example. But whatever it is, like just figure out the ways you want to meet people, and that you can do it sustainably, because whatever it is, even if it's like a random person you think won't help you, like there are folks who I just randomly met like 10 years ago that are helping me right now, simply because I just like followed them. I was consistent and I leaned in, even though I didn't know like what the quote unquote business ROI was at the time. So yeah, I have more structured thoughts on like how to like dive deeper into constructing that flywheel. But that's my general advice for people who are starting out. It's a leap of faith, y'all. Spider-Man. Anyway.
Sounds great. And actually, I think we're about at the top of the hour here, so I'll do that. So actually, I would love to give you an opportunity to pitch your services, or pitch whatever you would like here. You got 1 minute to say whatever you'd like.
Pitch my services. I'm a dude that just tries to be helpful, but I am also human, so I cannot help everybody. I can drop my email, I can drop my account. If you want to really jam about like what it takes to build that flywheel, because that's the reason I harp on that so much, is I'm also doing that myself for other projects I have on the side. And I'm experimenting with, I am experimenting with, I'm always experimenting. But long story short, if you want help, hit me up on LinkedIn, hit the connect button, not the follow one, because everyone accidentally hits the follow one, hit connect, and I'm happy to jam. I'm not charging anything for that. I don't, at this point in my life, I'm not interested in charging for that specific thing. So just reach out to me. I'm happy to help. We can do 15 to 30, whatever. Thanks for having me, y'all. Hope I yapped enough that it was like coherent in some way. And let me know I can be of service. Cheers.
Yeah,
good.
thanks for coming out. This has been great. And thank you everyone for watching. We will see you next week with another episode of Office Hours. Take care.